Hi, and welcome to another episode of Dawn of Discernment. Today, my guest is my friend Brenda Murphy, who I connected with pretty early on in the 2020 nonsense, because we were both talking about that for a while. But if anyone's not familiar, Brendan D. Murphy researches consciousness, post-mortem models, non-physical perception, and the origins of modern metaphysical narratives. As the creator of the consciousness transition model, his work synthesizes contemporary data with classical esoteric frameworks, most notably in Reverse Engineering the Afterlife, Book 2 of the Grand Illusion series, a cutting-edge study of the afterlife system and rules of non-physical perception, which is coming soon. And that's
Very
really going to be
soon.
the very soon. It's going to be the focus of our conversation today. So thank you very much for joining me today to talk about all of this. And I have had some, I have read some extracts that have been sent to me, and you're in for a treat. So whether people have read the Grand Illusion Part One or Book One, I should say, which is amazing. And I'm going to have to be honest and say I haven't quite finished yet. I'm a bit of a butterfly with books. I kind of dip in and out of them.
I know how that goes.
Um, yes, yes. And it's not quite kid in a sweet shop, but more, wow, this is exciting, and I like to dive into like the original. And in fact, it's thanks to you that I've dived into some of the original works of the people that again you referred to as well, just because it's fascinating to see what they came up with. But
Mm.
anyway, so this is kind of going off on a tangent. But in your in those extracts, there are a couple of quote or three quotes that I think are going to be kind of forefront of what we're going to be, or the background of what we're going to be talking about. So one of them is consciousness is the fundamental ground of reality. Reality is consciousness interpreting information and generating meaning. And the third one, which is probably nearer to what we're going to be talking about more, is death is just consciousness exiting the physical etheric tuning system. As I was saying just before we started, I came across the Seth material back in 2002. I know it's channeled material, and we can talk about that maybe if you want to. But one of the things that really was so powerful for me was in learning about that. It was the concept that you and it came in the phrase that you're as dead now as you're ever going to be. And there was something in that that just spoke volumes to me, and it was just like, yes. So getting some information about NDEs, near-death experiences, and those sorts of things has been fascinating. And I've dived into some books about that, which are the sorts of things we're going to be talking about. So, as you said, the Grand Illusion series. So we're talking about book 2 in this series. Have you kind of envisioned how many you think will actually be in the series? Because you alluded to book 3 at the end of book 2, so you've obviously got more kind of sitting there in the pipeline or ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to cull a massive amount of material out of book two, so book three is already underway.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
there's definitely a continuation. I was actually thinking, I've been thinking for a while that this will be a trilogy. Like there's going to be like the three-part trilogy, and maybe after that you know, do something a little bit in a slightly different vein, different direction. But yeah, there's definitely going to be like the Grand Illusion trilogy where we continue the threads that I've been pulling on. Because this leads into book two, all that material leads into book three really naturally. And like I said, I've had to cut a lot of material out that will actually fit into that third volume. So yeah, I've got a lot to do.
Well, there was a bit of a gap between book 1 coming out and book 2. So you've obviously spent a lot of time researching, because I know at the beginning you say you pull on 40 different um, uh, kind of resources, and I mean it's just phenomenal. So, and from what I've read, you are extremely thorough in the depth that you go into and the breadth of your research and how you put these things together, and it's just amazing. It's really stunning. So no wonder these books take you a long time. So I mean, book two is called. So that's the title, Reverse Engineering the Afterlife.
At the moment, it is. It might change, but I kind of like that.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. So, can you tell us about the core essence of book two then? What led you to concentrate on that aspect?
Well, that's a really great question. I think it's I have to go back to the start of my writing timeline to kind of even answer that because when I started writing, I was 24 and I didn't have a clear idea of what exactly I was trying to produce. So, I went for nearly almost 6 years before I produced book one. And I wasn't clear until, maybe 3, 4 years into the timeline. Oh, okay, this is going to be book one. Like all the other stuff I can put off to the side, this will be book one. And that meant that a ton of, by the time I was finished and it was ready, I had like probably 7 or 8 volumes of material that I generated, which were just like, no, not using you, not using you. So book two was a huge chunk of some of that material that didn't make it into book one. And so that was already, I had the bones of, already probably 200,000 words sitting there for book two. And that was like, okay, this was very much leaning in the direction of post-mortem existence, afterlife kind of themes. And as I kept working on it, I realized that it was, I was able to have insights that were, not out there, say not published or, as I pulled on the threads more and more, I was like, oh, I need to drill down into this more because I'm onto something here. And, even now I'm editing, I'm in the back end of the process, but I'm still actually, certain things are still crystallizing and I'm still having insights around certain things. So, that was, I don't know if that answers your question, but some sense of hopefully.
Yeah, no, fine. It was just really to, I suppose um, because the content is quite different from book one, which is the synthesis of science and spirit, and so the art, NDEs, the afterlife, because this is a question we all ask, who are we, why are we here, what happened, what is it all about, which we might get into. But you introduce the concept of, well, again, as you read out in your bio, the consciousness transition model. So can you tell us more about what it is and why the field needs that? What's that all about?
Yeah, so I guess the premise of that is, as you mentioned, the fundamental nature of reality is consciousness. And so that's the starting point, that's the ground. It's meaningless to speak about existence without positing consciousness as the baseline, the foundation. So yeah, within that sort of view, my view is that the only thing that exists is essentially, at least as far as we're concerned, consciousness moving through or transitioning through different states, different experiences, and different operational contexts. So that's kind of the essence of the consciousness transition model. I'll just call it the CTM. um, is that that's all that really exists. That's all that's happening. There's this continuing, ongoing sort of cycling through different states of awareness, different modes of being. And I don't see that there's actually an endpoint to that either. So for me, it's just very fluid.
Yes, I mean that's where the our language gets in the way because people want kind of beginnings, endings, and or want to know beginnings and endings, and wrapping our heads around the, if you like, the now, being
Yeah.
now, which can be difficult when if we want to get into reincarnation, what that is, which me way, which I'm sure we will. So consciousness is always transitioning. That's your basic premise.
I
So
guess that's
that's
it. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that obviously then, that naturally leads us into a discussion of the afterlife and different operational contexts for consciousness post-mortem and what shifts do we go through? How do we change? How does our awareness alter moving through, different, because I have an architecture and, I guess it's in some respects, people are kind of already aware of some of those ideas, but I've kind of taken a bit further so that I'm just trying to flesh out, what are the rules behind the transitions? What does it look like on the other side? What are the constraints that govern the experience of the shift from one state of consciousness into the next? Like when someone has an NDE type experience, what's actually going on there? What does that represent? What are the rules underlying it? That kind of thing. So I'm trying to get at, rather than looking at belief systems in terms of, do I like this? Does that make me feel good? Is this comfortable? I'm looking at what's actually the underlying structure and mechanics that brings the different belief systems into being in the first place.
Yeah, there are some people that would probably say, well, how can you know? Because, you're not dead. So what happens? However, there's OBEs, the outer body experiences that I think, and I mean, again, where I'm my personal opinion, that I mean, not that I've had one, so I can't speak from experience, unfortunately. But they're the kinds of experiences that can give a glimpse into something. So, well, people are still alive, and there are plenty of people who've had such experiences and report them. In fact, well, I don't know. I mean, do you think more people have these experiences than actually report them?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I didn't report any of my experiences to anybody.
Oh, okay. Would you like to share some, or any of your, or the first one, or the one that made you kind of realize something, or get some insights from, I suppose?
I mean, yeah, OBEs, as far as the OBEs go, it's never really been my main focus, but you know, because my journey started with the holographic universe, as you know, and then that actually triggered what some people would call a mystical experience or a peak state, which is basically an experience of infinite consciousness, and so that became my kind of like operational context, and it was never really my priority to go having out of body experiences or that kind of thing. But I had one very very brief one spontaneously one time in Melbourne at a friend's place, just staying there temporarily, and it was kind of like I just separated, and it was like I bounced off each wall in the room and then straight back into my body, and it was just very quick and kind of like almost like, oh, I was just curious, just wanted to try that out, and now I'm done. But and so that was the only sort of proper OBE I could speak to. And then, in chapter two, as we were just talking about before, I mentioned an experience which was not what I would call or class as an OBE, but more of a spontaneous kind of parallel reality sort of experience, like an alternate version of my Earth life. So, if you want to circle back to that, we can, or we can pull on that thread now. It's up to you.
Yes, no, yes, I do remember that. So yes, because now you've explained that, I know what you mean. I know what you're referring to, which is, yeah, I mean, it's worth sharing because it's an alternative experience or an experience in an alternative kind of consciousness. So yeah, if you share that, I mean, do you think those kinds of experiences help or helped you frame where you are, or do you, like you say, you didn't really need it because you already had that kind of awareness at a
Yeah, I
different
mean,
level?
my baseline was the kind of the original sort of mystical experience. Some people would call it cosmic consciousness, or entering the void, or maybe the monad, or whatever framework they're using. So that for me was kind of like that was the foundation. But yeah, as far as that sort of parallel reality experience goes, Amy and I were living in the Byron Bay region, and I had to have a little blood sample taken. And I don't know why, but for some reason, healthy young men seem to be weirdly prone to like getting faint and passing out around needles and things. So that's basically what I did. I was sitting in the chair and I blacked out. And Amy said that my eyes kind of rolled back into my head. And but I was gone. Like I was in this suddenly in this other alternate Earth life situation. And some of the details have kind of faded now, but I just remember I was walking along outside. I was outdoors. The sun's shining. I'm in some kind of a cityscape somewhere. Very familiar, like it's just the most normal thing in the world. I don't know where I was going. I was going somewhere. And it was just like I just had this sense of just a kind of a tacit knowing this is just life, this is just normal. And I was just kind of going about my business in this other parallel Earth reality. And so that was interesting. That kind of bothered me a bit because it was like, well, this version of my life did not exist while I was out. It was gone. And so that lack of continuity kind of bugged me for a while, and that kind of that sat in the back of my mind as a something to try to figure out, like, what does that actually mean? What actually happened, as opposed to just saying, well, like accepting the assumption, oh, it was a literal parallel Earth. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something a little more like subtle or nuanced. Like Robert Monroe experienced, as he was the kind of like the OG of the OBE. So he documented his experiences across three books, and some of the experiences he had, he categorized them in different ways. He had like locale one, locale two, and locale three. And locale three for him, he basically sort of defined it as like a parallel Earth, an alternate Earth reality. And his visits there, he had all sorts of interesting experiences. He found that their technology was a little bit anachronistic. They were still using like steam powered trains, this kind of thing. But he took it as a literal alternate parallel universe, parallel Earth, and I was tempted for a while to class my experience as like a locale three experience, parallel Earth, but it may be just that we have these potential realities that only exist when we actually shift our awareness into them, and that's when they become real. That's actually kind of the direction that Tom Campbell, who used to work with Robert Monroe, has gone with this. He's basically saying they don't exist as independent realities, but they become real when we shift our awareness to them. Um, and so I tend now to lean more in that kind of a direction with that sort of thing.
Interesting. How would you say that differs from what we call dreams? Because it's still us in a dream, and dreamscapes can be all of all kinds. They could be similar to this and very, very different. So, I mean, do you
Mm.
see them as being the dreamscape, if you like, or the dream place being somewhat different, or
Yeah, I do, and I actually
okay.
get quite a bit into that in book two. Um, because when we're dreaming, we're generally not in a particularly lucid state, and it's generally lacking coherence. There's a lot of like discontinuity, very bizarre stuff, very surreal, things that don't make sense. But you go along with it because whatever, you're not really fully present unless you become lucid, which is a different kind of thing. So a dream to me is like qualitatively and experientially very, very different to, the locale three parallel universe kind of reality. Like that for me, when I say I was, having the ostensible experience of this alternate Earth life, that was absolutely crystal clear, completely lucid, and just like as real as this, what we're doing now is absolutely real. Whereas I don't look at my dreams in that way. They're not that kind of thing. So to me, the dream thing is it's like we have the body-based kind of conscious mind awareness, and then when we go to sleep, we shift a little bit. It's an altered state, but we're still essentially in like a bubble, our own little bubble, personal, customized dream world, very subjective kind of fluid reality, which can be shifted into a lucid dream. And then, people talk about the lucid dream being like a gateway to having OBEs and that kind of thing. So yeah, to me, they exist in different kind of categories, I guess.
Okay, well, when we talk about, we and us and who we are, and that you're saying in your experience, it was you. But you also say, we exist as multiple selves. So it's like it's using this word self and what we think self is and identifying with, a lot of people just don't identify with this kind of body, and yet we're more than that. And who or what is the self? I mean, where are you with that? Because when you say it was you, was it you, Brendan, or was it you as a sort of a slightly different uh, aspect of you?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And for me, generally, it's kind of awkward to try to word things, verbalize them sometimes.
Mm,
Um,
I know the language gets in the way, but just yeah.
it does. If we were telepathic,
Mm.
it'd help. Um, but so with whatever experience we're having, to borrow, one of the Vedantic terms, they talk about Atman and Brahman, and Brahman's kind of the universal infinite consciousness, and Atman is like the localized center within that infinite field, and they're the same thing. They're the same in essence. So wherever we are, or wherever we seem to be, whatever altered state of consciousness we're in, that I center, the I is still present. So it in the context of my weird experience, that parallel guy, I couldn't say that it was Brendan because that was a different universe, different life, different city, different everything. But I still the sense of I am, the presence of being aware felt the same, which is kind of a weird situation. So the presence of the I is kind of what stabilizes and normalizes things, all the different transitions and shifts that it goes through. And this is part of esoteric traditions, which talk about like another Sanskrit term, the Sutratman, the thread soul that weaves its way through these different experiences, different bodies, different personalities. But the center of I consciousness is still there. So when we drop the body and when people die, a lot of people don't realize that they're dead because the I is still very, very much awake and aware. And sometimes they need help with that.
Yes, and from what you've just said, it's clear that you've gone into many different sort of ancient traditions, as well as modern writings of NDEs and OVEs and things like that. So, um, because I mean, you do you do talk about NDEs quite extensively, and there's consistency a lot across these different cultures. That there are some differences, but there are similarities and there are differences. So with everything that you've studied, what kind of what have you come to? What processes have you come to in an understanding of the similarities and the differences? If
Specifically
that
with
makes sense.
NDEs.
It was, yes, with NDEs at the moment, yeah, because you were
Okay.
talking about, when people die. But I mean, NDEs obviously are not people who have actually died, but they're, the near death.
Yeah, they're getting some glimpses. They're getting some glimpses,
Mm.
usually of like the initial stages of transition. And it's sort of like what happens, what you see in, I've got this mapped out in chapter three, is across the centuries or the millennia and all the cultures around the world, they tend to experience similar things, similar types of, journeys into this other world. They encounter a light, they encounter beings, they might encounter deceased family and friends. They have some kind of maybe a transformational or a healing type experience, and they return to their body one way or another. So there is a kind of like an underlying structural commonality across the different continents, across centuries and millennia. But what happens is cultural conditioning is kind of what determines the graphic user interface, like what that looks like when people when they transition their awareness into the other side. So the where we get lost is where people get confused is that the surface level, the appearances of things look different, but the underlying sort of structure of it is actually really similar, and it has been similar for centuries, and it's still similar to this day. I mean, you can map parallels from NDEs that happened this week to NDEs that happened centuries ago. And it's just that there are cultural, conditioning factors that play into how it appears on the surface level, and which characters show up, which god or goddess or savior or this kind of thing. This is all cultural conditioning. They call it cultural embeddedness in the field. So yeah, it's interesting. There are those differences, but underlying it, there is like a program or an algorithm that seems to sort of dictate that there's this process that unfolds. Like, for example, the life review, which has an algorithmic quality to it, because it tends to happen in the same kind of format to everybody. Particularly in the modern era, you see people will describe their life review as happening from their most recent moment, like right up to their death, and then it's like their life flashes before them in rewind, and right back to the point of conception or birth. And it doesn't involve any kind of conscious will or choice on the part of the person having the experience, which is really interesting. So there's this algorithmic kind of quality through NDEs and through the life review aspect of it, where you can see there's some kind of like systemic pattern or system rules that are dictating the kind of experience that people have, which is in itself quite interesting, because it shows that we have to be participating in something, a shared collective kind of something, a field that is shared in order for that to be the case.
Yeah, because skeptics will say, oh, people are just hallucinating. Um, and the commonality is what I find stunning, because it shows there's definitely a there, as they say. You can't deny when, as you say, there's a huge volume of evidence of the similarities.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can talk about the differences, and they're cultural, which doesn't surprise me really, because that's part of the, I mean, you could say kind of belief systems that we experience. What we experience is, based on belief systems and ideas and thoughts and choice, and again, choices of what we're here for, or whatever that means, or
Yeah.
whatever this experience is for. But it is the commonality that I
And
think does refute the idea that it's a hallucination. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
no, no, I didn't mean to
No, no,
interrupt you.
go.
I'm glad you touch on the skeptics, because first of all, and Raymond Moody has been onto these guys for decades. Literally, he's the original gangster who popularized the whole NDE concept. And the skeptics shouldn't actually be called skeptics. They shouldn't refer to themselves as skeptics, because if you look at the way they operate, they actually don't fit the definition of skeptics. They don't even know what the word means. They completely misuse it. And so they have this weird tendency to not want to address the evidence honestly, and to really actually work with what the data indicates. They prefer to twist it to suit their own preconceived notions about what is possible, which to them is nothing, because consciousness is just an epiphenomenon that's in the brain, and that's the end of the story for them. So to maintain that narrative, they have to lie to themselves, and unfortunately, they are also lying to the public when they publish their studies and whatnot, because they refuse to be honest about what the data actually shows. And they've been caught multiple times lying by omission. I think lying by omission is their favorite way to go, because in order to notice that they're lying about something by leaving a crucial detail out, you have to know what the material is first to be able to see that, right? So it's like a blind spot that nobody notices, and they get away with it until someone else comes along who knows the material and goes, "Hey, conveniently left that out, did we?" And there's some really classic and egregious examples of that. And right up to right now, some of the skeptics still operating now, who, I think Worley is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I've got an example that I found through Anthony Peake, where he's talking about a case study, which is quite an old one, to do with survival of consciousness outside the body. And it's actually the case, if you look at it, it's a very powerful case in support of survival of consciousness. But he omits the most important detail about the whole case, and just completely leaves it out of his report, to try to push the idea that, oh, there's nothing to see here, folks. Go, go back to sleep. It's all fine. And so that's what they do. And I've noticed this because I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen many instances of that kind of thing. And there's actually someone did a really cool study on the difference between skeptics and people who are just, more interested and curious, and the two groups and how they operate. And they found that when skeptics made a mistake in their analysis or commentary, 100% of the time they made a mistake, it supported their confirmation bias. It supported their belief system. Whereas the other group, some of their mistakes did not support their belief system. So the level of bias that the so-called skeptics have is off the charts. They are not skeptics at all. They are not skeptical of anything they believe about reality, any of their ontology. They're not skeptical towards any of it. They take it all for granted and they try to protect it with a weirdly religious zeal, which is funny because, they're supposed to be the antidote to the religious mentality, but they actually have the exact same mentality, just pointed in a different direction, in a different ideological direction. So it's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, and I would imagine their writings are peppered with a whole range of logical fallacies as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, yeah, I suppose skeptics is the wrong word, really. That um, I, how they can dismiss. I mean, for me, one of the most powerful was the case of Anita Moorjani, who I think a lot of people are learning about her experience. And I mean, that was
Mhm.
just so powerful. And she's, a real person, genuine person who's, um, you could, she shared her information to the extent where, she was close to being on her deathbed, and cool. And this is why I like it, because I'm sorry, I shouldn't smile, but it just it just supports, saying that the medical establishment doesn't understand, the body, who we are, what is possible, and so they,
Yeah.
they pronounce people as incurable, or, well, that's it, there's nothing more we can do, and yet she recovered from a position or situation, I should say, where it would have been, well, there's nothing more we can do. I mean, that they actually said that. I mean, she was expected to actually die within no time at all, and she shared that information, and I think uh, I mean, that's a recent example, and that's very powerful. And
Mm. Yeah.
um, I assume you know about her case, and so her experiences of who she met and what inspired her to come back. I mean, would you say that's fairly typical of the kind of experiences that people report?
I think I've got actually a chunk of her case study in my book because I'm talking about aspects of it.
Okay.
I just want to mention quickly that when I'm doing this work and I have these case studies and stories, I'm not just repeating them. I'm actually excavating them and analyzing them for what's going on structurally and what it means and represents and all that stuff. Um, so I do talk about hers in brief, and I'm not sure if I know all of the experience she had, but it was very powerful, and she did have that spontaneous remission that you're talking about, and there were aspects of what she experienced that are absolutely very common to a lot of other NDEs, um, and she actually in my framework, I have this thing that I refer to as the causal corridor, which is basically it's kind of like when you start to expand your awareness beyond your current personality. And so esoterically, the causal body is where at that level you become aware of past lives, alternate versions of you, so to speak, past, future lives, all that kind of stuff. So what happens when certain people's experiences, some people don't have this. A lot of NDEs just kind of happen in like low to mid-level astral kind of environments, but some of them start to expand into more of the causal corridor, so to speak. And hers did a bit because she started to have those interconnections with other people and she started to have spontaneous memories of, oh, he's from, my brother is this character from my other life, and that kind of awareness from the trans lifetime awareness is where you're starting to kind of go into the causal corridor. So yeah, she's had some similar experiences to other people as well. There are definitely parallels for sure.
Mm. Um, so, well, where are we? So, yeah, if we want to talk about sort of different experiences and as you say, the volume of evidence, the those who have written about NDEs. I mean, I one of the books I did actually finish was Ian Stevenson's Children Who Remember Previous Lives. I mean, it's interesting that children seem to have more information about this, and there's a pretty good reason for that. So if you want to sort of talk about that a bit and how uh, why that information or from young children is important, to listen to be aware of, and to bring that into the whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean Stevenson, I mean he did such massive work. Excuse me, such massive work around that with these children. He ended up finding that the past life memories would be more available up until the age of about 5, and then they would start to kind of, their minds would become focused on other things. And but his work showed that whether or not you like the reincarnation idea, these kids are getting information that doesn't belong to their personality here and now in this life, and they have these weird connections to like someone over in the next village who they have no connection to their current life family, but this child has this vivid memory of being this other member of this other family, and they go and Stevenson would do these detailed investigations. He was a detective, and he would interview everybody concerned, and the details and the conviction, like the emotional investment of the kid in this other family, their sense of connection to them was really profound and not normal at all. Like there was no normal kind of 3D explanation for what these kids were experiencing and finding. And so his research was really powerful because you can't like reductionism doesn't have an explanation for what his research found. It doesn't fit a physicalist paradigm at all. So what do we do with that? I mean, I know some people don't like the reincarnation idea. They try to explain it in different ways, like it's a picking up somebody else's memories from the field and this kind of thing. Um, which is possible in principle, but I find those explanations a bit kind of bland and not compelling for the most part, because it's like they're trying to avoid the obvious what seems to be the obvious thing, which is consciousness separating from the body in one life, returning to the non-physical paradigm for some amount of time, and then reinserting itself into a slightly different context, but in these cases very similar context because they're in the nearby neighboring village or town, with a family that could walk there to visit the new family kind of thing. So it's one of those things you can't say black and white that he's proved reincarnation, but he's definitely strengthened the evidence at the very least. I mean, what's your take on that? Because I know you sounded like you had some things to say there as you were asking the question.
Well, it's I don't know. Maybe the word, maybe the issue is with the word reincarnation. And again, if you want to go, well, in terms of time, that it's like there isn't a linear time. So how we interpret that. But it certainly shows that, like with your consciousness transition model, that the consciousness is maybe more, well, is not tied to, sort of this body, as it were. And as you say, is within children, they still are connected to other things. But it's so you said you're not happy with the idea that it's picking up other lives in the field, but there's something for them that
Yeah, I
they
mean,
connect to personally. I mean, this is I'm exploring, because at the moment
mm,
I don't have fixed ideas, but again, within it's a question of who is or the self that is experiencing these different lives. And certainly with what I've read of Ian Stevenson's work, I mean, some of these children are just know so much about this other life and
mm,
the people, and that it's, as you say, it can't be, oh well, they heard about it from somewhere. I mean, it can't be explained by anything
yeah.
within kind of, normal
It,
kind of reductionist ideas.
it can't be. But in my framework, there's there is definitely continuity of the personality, um, within certain aspects of the architecture. So, what I think with these kids, most of these cases of like vivid recall of that other life tended to be that they died young, or they died traumatically, died violently. A lot of the time, because he would trace the scars back to the previous personality's like wound. He got shot here, this kind of thing. So to me, like, to try to, these other explanations seem very, very kind of arbitrary. But if you look at it as, this, if you accept the premise that consciousness can survive and actually intrinsically exists without, biology, it makes a lot of sense. But if you have these different layers of the architecture where, okay, so what happens with these, and this is what I was trying to get at before, what happens with these people who vividly remember the past lives is they often don't go deep enough into the post-mortem sort of architecture to kind of reintegrate and heal. They don't go far enough with the healing process. They tend to remain quite earthbound. So so what you have is a personality structure that actually retains its state to quite a high degree of fidelity. So it's essentially the same person hanging out non-physically, like, and there's, this is all documented through different studies, the way that, somebody can remember, well, I died and then I hung out over here in this palm tree for, 50 years, and, that kind of thing. So there's what we have is ostensibly the continuity of the personality, and then it waits for another opportunity to reinsert itself into, the video game, so to speak, in a slightly different game state. And you get this massive amount of recall in some people of where the data is still fresh in their minds, because essentially the personality structure is the same. It hasn't been, they haven't gone deep into the architecture, back into the causal corridor. They haven't reintegrated in the oversoul entity, the causal entity, and they've stayed in that low level kind of astral simulacrum of earth life, waiting to just dive back in. So they have the same astral body, they have the same mental body reinserted back into the next physical body. So essentially, the personality structure is the same. This isn't a personality that's been configured from higher levels of the architecture, like the causal oversoul, where, the different, that's a very vast level of consciousness, where it's intentionally architecting a new personality structure and then inserting that into the Earth life operating system. These people who remember their past lives tend to be people who've had that astral continuity and just jump back into the video game as quickly as they could.
Right, so that definitely makes sense because of their violent, as you say, violent death. A lot of them were, murdered or also. Okay, I
Which
mean
is why you
that's
get the scars and things carrying over.
yes, I mean that certainly makes sense. And one of the things again you talk about, I mean, might be a slight tangent, but I mean there's so many parts to this, but hopefully we'll cover as many. Is that as you say, in terms of if you like, for want of a better word, souls incarnating here, is that they don't actually kind of integrate into the fetus until the sort of second or third sort of trimester. So they're not totally here yet, which kind of might explain why the early years children are so much more open to, or not as connected to this realm.
Mm.
And of course, that's why they'd be more open to picking up things because they're not quite, should we say, grounded into this
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, yeah. And that's actually that, what you said about the second and third trimester is that shows up across a few different sources. So it's not just one person saying it. It's esotericists from, 1800s. It's people having past life regressions right now. It's coming from all over the place. Apparently the incoming personality structure doesn't feel the need to connect with the fetus until kind of late in the process. And there's a like a melding process and an integration process that happens. And there are different reports of the process of bonding with the baby's body and working with the nervous system and all that kind of stuff that happens. But yeah, it seems like they can leave it to the last, like virtually the last second. And then what is reported is a lot of these people are saying, well, I can kind of come and go as I please. Like I can come out of the body, come back in, come out. And, they can continue. Some of these people have vivid memories of doing that through the first few years of their childhood. So they're kind of consciously living in two different, very different paradigms.
So not quite out of body, but not, uh, yeah, I suppose a kind of out of body experience in a way.
That seems to be what they're describing, essentially. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And you were talking about operating systems. So I know you use a lot of analogies, sort of computer-like analogies, even though you're not, well, or maybe not. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Um, I get the impression you're not calling this a video game. I mean, like you said, video game. It's not. These are analogies, or if
Yeah.
you want to explain how you use those those terms and
Yeah, sure. I
what
mean,
they.
yeah, like it's not, I'm not being literal when I say video game.
Hmm.
And like the point of, like, I refer to it as different things depending on the context to try to just illustrate, well, this is how it works. This is what's happening. Like, so the video game analogy is actually really, really on point for a lot of things, particularly talking about, the reincarnation stuff. And the simulation idea. A lot of people have gone down the road of thinking that we're literally in some kind of technological construct, but that's not really it's not really tenable literally. But as an analogy or a metaphor, it's actually really useful at certain times to explain the dynamics of what we're participating in. That's why I call it an operating system, and I use computing terminology because so much of what happens in computing, and I'm not a computer guy, but I've been pulling on this thread a little bit. So much of it maps so well to our lived experience in the Earth life system. So, I mean, using those analogies is a really useful way to kind of get just to get the point across. Ultimately, I come back to consciousness is the fundamental, if you like, abstract ontological ground. It's formless. We're not literally in a computer, but computing analogies are useful in understanding how the process plays itself out, sure.
Have you any ideas why the simulation theory has become so popular? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the process of people um, letting go of or moving on from old ideas about what it is that we're doing here. Like we've largely moved on from the classical religious models. Most people today aren't convinced by that kind of thinking. I know that there's also a Jesus resurgence happening, which we could potentially talk about later, but. Um, so we're looking for better explanations. We're looking for what is going on here. That doesn't make sense. So I think people are just kind of groping. Essentially, we're all groping in the dark for a better answer that seems to make sense and seems to fit the facts. But I just keep coming back to reminding people that literalism invariably leads you into a cul-de-sac. It's never the answer. I don't care if it's religious, born again Christianity or or simulation theory, literalism. As soon as you get into the literal side of it, you've lost the plot, and then you end up in this kind of holding pattern, wasting your time and kind of chasing red herrings and stuff. So it's useful to use the analogies to get a better understanding on a conceptual level, as long as we don't fall into the trap of the literal and literalism in the soul trap discussion or whatever it might be.
Well,
Um,
we'll come to that
yeah.
because I mean that's such an important one. And again, with analogies, and I know you use the analogy of the Matrix, and a lot of people have been kind of seeing something to do with it. Only I think maybe some people have taken that too far, and are then translating it. Oh, well, we're just, this will probably lead us into the soul trap type of ideas, but we are being manipulated by others. We're just and again the whole loosh idea, so all of that, but uh, so many
I
parts
mean,
to all of that. But I mean, if you want, do you, I mean, we know that the entertainment industry is guides us kind of yeah, it's a propaganda machine. They're sort of trying to guide us in certain directions. So my view is that it's kind of directing us in a view to make us feel more like victims. And yet,
mm,
as always, there's a kernel of truth in there somewhere, in the interpretation of, who and what we are, and, the sort of freedom part of it. But anyway, so yeah, I'll
yeah,
I'll leave
yeah.
that for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was going to say you talk about the Matrix and how people have kind of got on board with that and taken it a bit too far. I agree. Um, but it's what we're always doing through time, through probably I don't know how far back we really go, but and I don't know how far back this phenomenon goes, but we're engaged in the process of mythopoesis. We're creating myths about where we've come from, what's going on, where we're going, what it all means. And so, and what happens, it's really interesting because we can feed ideas into the collective and then they can get picked up by somebody. For example, I might have a vision about like a matrix kind of scenario, and then the Wachowskis might pick up on that through the collective field and then turn it into a movie. And then that idea gets fed out into the discourse, into the masses. People see that and they go, ah, and they like latch on to certain aspects of it because it seems to make sense of something. And then this is how we start to build these collective myths, and oh, we're literally being harvested, we're literally batteries. But no, metaphorically and analogically, it's really powerful and very effective because you can see what the Matrix is showing you is actually, on one level, how the mind imprisons itself, how people create mental prisons for themselves, and then also how we are manipulated on another level. Like there's essentially a control system, but again, don't take it literally. So the mythopoesis process is something that we're just always engaged in, and people are constantly creating new myths to explain to themselves what's going on. Because as soon as you leave behind like the Abrahamic religions, well, what else have you got? If you don't accept one of the religious explanations, those myths, then part of you goes looking for something else. We like to have answers. And so we're always drawn to the next thing that seems to make sense. So like as people break away from one form of hypnosis, they become susceptible to a next form of hypnosis, the new thing. And so that's kind of what's happening as well with a lot of different things at the moment. People go off in different tangents, different ideologies and beliefs, but we're always engaging in this process of manufacturing the next myth. And what's really interesting, which is one of the core themes of my work, is the way that people can experience this in altered states of consciousness, out of body experiences in particular, remote viewing in particular. Not so much NDEs because that's a kind of different class of experience that tends to filter out a lot of the nonsense. But yeah, so I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, no, I mean that's excellent because um, people do influence their experiences through whatever the stories are, and uh, that is to a certain extent used against us by the propaganda machine. So it's just the sun's going. It's lovely. The sun's going down, but it's sort of just shining there. Anyway, it is the story that people want answers, and I think that's also part of the indoctrination of the whole indoctrination system that's called school, where people you're expected to learn things and then provide answers, so we want answers, and yet to some extent, the more you look into, the more, well, for me, the more I look into this, it opens up more questions in many ways, which is exciting because there's more to explore.
Mm.
So, I mean, where are you in the idea of I suppose that what the stories are and why we're well, I mean, you really, as you said, we're trapped in stories. You want answers, and yet it seems strange that people aren't more curious to want to keep looking and ask questions.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, go.
no, I was just going to say, do you find more people are asking, or do more people are open to this?
Yeah, definitely. At the same time, as they leave one belief system, what ha tends to happen with most people is they get hypnotized by another one. So they kind of like they'll take the elevator up a level or two, and then get stuck there because something there seems to have has this enormous emotional appeal, or seems to make sense of something for them, and so they go, "Oh no, this is where it's at. This is me right here. I don't need to go any further. Why would I even consider questioning this? Because this just feels right." And most people, and I read this somewhere in some esoteric, probably some theosophical document, or maybe Rosicrucian, where they talk about the age that we're in right now, like the epoch that humanity is going through is actually developing the emotional and perfecting the emotional body. So we haven't even reached the level or the age of the intellectual mental body. We're not even there yet. We're still in the emotional body, figuring that out. And that, to me, is an interesting lens on why we are so susceptible to the nonsense, and why I mean, most people want a good story. Most people are storytellers, and that's why I'm, so isolated in what I do, is because I'm looking for structure and mechanics and architecture, like what the hell is actually driving this, rather than what makes me feel comfortable so that I can go back to sleep. And so that's the difference in the mentality between, some people like us. We're a minority because we are actually kind of like almost the next age of humanity stuck in this one. We're kind of like we're accessing the next level, and most people don't want to do that. They're just happy to go based on vibes.
Yes, there's a yes, I suppose the safety in being at a place where, as you say, feel comfortable. And it's, it's like the kind of so-called rabbit holes, or, going down the onion layers, that, there are so many levels, and people get to a level and then feel that's it, and not realizing that there's more to uncover. Um, I mean, this is going to tie into soul traps in a way, but a couple of weeks ago, I gave a presentation, and in the questions, so I mean, it wasn't relevant to what I was talking about, but somebody he was getting himself quite agitated by the what's going on out there in the world, and saying, oh, it's an evil world because of what these people are doing. As you know people have been reading, if they've been following kind of mainstream stuff, which I don't really. It's kind of out there in the peripheral, in my periphery, in the sort of, but I don't. It's not I'm ignoring it. So again, kind of like I'm not spiritual bypassing. At the same time, I'm aware and putting finding the context to put it in, and so people are stuck in these ideas, and to some extent, it feels to me that they're doing that with these ideas of soul traps. Suddenly there's a new story about soul traps and
Yeah.
don't go to the light and that kind of thing. So, um, what are your views on them? Is there anything to it? What, or is it just a complete misunderstanding? Which, anyway, yeah, yeah. So where are you on that idea? Because I know you do talk about it in some detail in the book. So it's where what you can kind of distill, to give an overview, and anyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's so much more detail in the book. But yes, if you anyway, I'll leave that to you, please.
Yeah, as you said, like I can't, that's chapter nine, as it's currently numbered, it's chapter nine. There's no way I can replicate the level of, like analysis there in a conversation.
I
It's
know.
no, I haven't seen anybody put together an analysis of it like that either. So it's very detailed, it's multi-layered, and it's very comprehensive. So if people want to understand the soul trap, how we ended up there, not whether you want an opinion that you like it or don't like it, how we got there and why and what's driving that, that's in that chapter in detail, and it's much more coherent than I'll be able to, do here.
Oh, okay.
But there's a lot of different elements to it because there's an experiential element to it where people have had certain types of encounters, say in near-death experiences, um, where it seems like they encounter an entity that is trying to deceive them in some way or convince them to go back to their body or encourage them to reincarnate or something like that. And what most people do is they look at that experience on the surface level and they go, that is literally what's happening. Or someone goes, oh, you'll hear these psychic types say things like, I've literally seen the soul trap, like the machine, I've seen it. And again, taking their perception, like subjective perception in an altered state, clairvoyance, what have you, and literally literalizing it, concretizing it, and reifying it. And so that's where the conversation ends for people with that mindset. They're not thinking critically through it. They're not analyzing it. They're not breaking it down. They don't understand. Like, we've been warned for, I would say, at least a couple of centuries by mystics and esotericists about astral perception, like this low level mode of non-physical perception, and how illusory it is and how misleading it is. Blavatsky is just one example. She's been very clear about how misleading astral perception is and how delusory it can be. But none of these people seem to heed or be aware of any of those writings or the frameworks, any of that stuff. They don't have a concept of what's actually happening under the hood. So they take perception at face value and they go, that's literally what's happening. End of story, end of discussion. I've seen it. I've been there, whatever. I had an entity experience. Um, and there's actually what we're doing is we're operating in, to borrow, the esoteric terminology, we're operating in the monasic mind sort of framework. It's like low level consciousness, symbolic, dualistic, very heavily mediated by cultural conditioning, and a life experience and that kind of stuff. So when you go into those non-physical states and you encounter an entity in the early stages of your NDE. So in an NDE, like that is the low level kind of interface phenomena as you transition into the next paradigm. That's just the beginning of it. But people have when your brain is not the source, like the filter anymore, when you have just raw consciousness operating in a raw consciousness environment, it's much more abstract. And so we have this like abstraction faculty that has to kind of come online and stabilize, and it's never there. It's not generally functional in the NDEs in the early stages, that kind of thing. You can see some case studies which I talk about where it does start to come online and functional, become functional. But at the low levels in the monasic realm, like the manas principle is like basically the human soul or the mental kind of low mental level, and then that's where people are encountering these things and taking it at face value. But you have to look at the actual context, the whole context, and understand something about the esoterics behind what's going on and the symbolic nature of it. Because I talk about an example, a specific example, which came out of Isabella Green's book. She was talking about a guy she knows who had an NDE and experienced a being, some kind of entity, in the very early stages of it. And again, in the monasic field, low level abstraction faculty, not functional yet, people not understanding the dynamics playing out in their mind, because that's the only thing left. The mind is in its mental, manufactured mind environment. And so this guy has this exchange with the entity I documented in the book, and the entity is trying to convince him to kind of go back to his body or reincarnate or something. And the guy interprets it as, oh, well, this is an Archon type being. It's administering the soul trap. And this is all just, and it's all instead of looking at what actually happened, he rejected the advice of the being and went on his way. He went on his merry way, and that was the end of that. So any kind of strong form of soul trap conjecture falls to pieces because the guy just simply refused to comply. He just see you later. So, oh, how bad is the soul trap? If you can just simply refuse the offer, obviously it's not a very effective soul trap. So that's at the surface level of things, right? We can address it at the surface level, and I address it at that level and take it apart there as well. But what is never considered by people advocating this stuff is the monastic translation or interpretation problem, where we have a perception of something and forget to try to actually interpret it instead of going, oh no, it's literally what's happening, literally what's happening. So that's the level most people are operating at. It's literalism, and it's just a different kind of literalism to create a different kind of a new religion to replace the old religions. And it's a continuation. I've got so many strands of like thought jumping off my branching out. But I'll try to just keep it to there's an aspect of it where again you have to consider, it's like, for example, the dweller on the threshold phenomenon, when people have their, like, maybe their first out of body experience or something like that, and they encounter this entity. It's a mistake to interpret that entity as an independently existing separate being that has nothing to do with you. The dweller on the threshold is a projection of your own mind seemingly outside of you. So it's essentially, it's a mirror, and it's just something that is an aspect of your psyche that has become externalized. And that's probably, I'm going to suggest we should consider, at least consider the possibility that when we encounter these other entities, like a so-called archon or a demon or what have you, that these are actually unconsciously projected, like kind of split off, externalized aspects of our own psyches confronting us. And it actually makes perfect sense. You know, when the mind separates from the body, it's moving into a completely non-physical environment, and it's looking for anchorage points. It's looking for orientation. It's looking for stabilization. And so the ego is like, kind of like, what the hell's going on? Like, all my familiar reference points are gone. And what you would look for is, in many people will look for an external, like a source of help or stabilization, or someone, Jesus or the Buddha, or Aunt May, or whatever, whoever or whatever it might be. And we conjure an entity or a being, and the Tibetans were onto this a long, long time ago. That when you have the death process happening, you get the display of Rigpa, and you encounter the gods and the goddesses and the wrathful gods and all this. And they were very clear that we are projecting that. It's all projections of the mind. They don't take it literally. They have the sophistication to not literalize those entities and beings and say, "Oh, that's separate to me. That's nothing to do with me. That's just this horrible other thing, it being imposed on me." They actually were sophisticated enough to realize what was going on. It was the mind creating these projections, the display of Rigpa, and that's what we're still dealing with now. When we, as modern people, separate our consciousness from the body, we have our cultural conditioning and our ideas and belief systems to orient us in the non-physical environment. And so what people are doing, and collectively doing, is creating these virtual reality kind of holographic environments that seem completely real, like hyper real, and then participating in them as if they're real, and then, again, believing in them as if they're real. And so it all becomes reified and very concretized. It seems very convincing, but it's all the low level. I call it the Astral Fantasia. It's all low level monastic mind just kind of trying to make up a story, create meaning, to orient itself, to make sense of things, because it's non-physically existing now. It doesn't have its usual stabilization points for what's happening. So we unconsciously conjure these entities. It could be a demon, it could be the dweller on the threshold, it could be the so-called archon, but we need to look at the underlying mechanics of it rather than just simply taking things at face value. And I'll let you say something.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And again, it makes me wonder if the idea of whoever we experience in that shift out of this, out of here is going to be what is appropriate for us. So in the same way that some people are met by Jesus and other people are met by Buddha, some people are met by members of their family? I mean, would they come under the same kind of idea? Because it's just the comforting part of it, or the need for some kind of comfort as in that transition, or is there something more systematic in how we are, if you like, met when in that transition? I mean, because there are so many different ideas, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, no, I'll leave you to that because I can like lead off into so many other questions, but yeah, go with that one.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, I don't dismiss, see, I don't dismiss the distinct possibility of that people are encountering, the consciousness of people that they've known or, ancestors or whatever. Because the whole premise of my work is the survival of consciousness. So, if I'm saying that we survive, then obviously we have to extend that possibility to people who've gone before us.
What is the we that survives? But anyway, that's the so yeah, that's the next question. But yeah, no,
Okay.
I take your point. That's why I asked the question because there's distinction here, obviously.
Yeah. Um, So, I mean, there are different fields of research around this. If you look at the regression field, there's tens of thousands of case studies of people who basically all have the same experience. And, they report going into what they call the spirit world and being greeted by their soul cluster, which is, family, friends, people they've become associated with through time. And that is also supported through other sources, channeled material, clairvoyant reports, out of body experiences. I mean, the list goes on. So there are all these points of convergence that say, actually, we absolutely can have contact with people that we have known before. And there are many case studies, and I've got a section on Peak-in-Darien cases in the book, because they're some of the most powerful pieces of evidence of survival of consciousness. But they also usually involve a family member. They often involve a family member who had already died previously to the person having their NDE, and they have the NDE, go into this, amazing kind of altered experience of the afterlife, and then someone shows up who they've never, from this life, they don't know. They've never heard of them. They don't know the name, none of it. And when the NDE is done and they're back in their body and they've recovered, they'll mention, oh, like so and so came and met me, and we had a conversation about such and such. And it might be that they said, oh, my sister, Sarah, I met her and she was telling me all this amazing stuff. And the parents might look at each other and go, oh, wow, okay. Because you never knew that you had that sister. We didn't tell you because she died before you were ever born, and we just didn't tell you about it. And that kind of thing is repeated over and over again in the literature. Eben Alexander experienced meeting, I think it was his sister, his deceased sister, who he didn't know about, and nobody had told him about her. And he found out she existed because she was the one who met him in his NDE. And so there's all these cases of like that where the family member, who they didn't know existed, is the one who shows up to greet them. And I think that one of the reasons that happens is because it is very powerful evidence for the individual that the experience was valid, that their experience of the NDE, of the survival of their consciousness, was valid. Because if it was someone they knew already, it wouldn't have the same impact, would it? So, I don't subscribe to the naive idea that, these are all, archons administering the soul trap. It's silly, and I've shown in detail why. But yes, it's definitely, we have to at least consider the possibility that the family and friends thing is real.
So they'd appear in a way because we don't have a of like this body doesn't go with us, so they would appear in a way, but that it's not even that they appear physically. If I'm kind of reading what you again within the book as well, that it's not that there's a physical appearance, it's more
Well,
an understanding of who that person is.
I mean, the question is whether you're
Sorry.
operating in an environment that is based around form or not, because we have, and there are Sanskrit terms for this, the rupic environment, which is form based, and the arupic or arupic environment, which is not form based. So, like the thing is, if we're operating in a field of consciousness where the only thing that exists is consciousness, then that mind can configure itself to create whatever appearance it feels like. I mean, it could show up as a raccoon, it could show up as a human being, it could show up as anything. It doesn't matter because it's just a mental projection. And that opens up a whole other bunch of tangents. Like, when we talk about being people who think that they've encountered Jesus, for example, in the NDE. I think Seth talks about this as well, and he's not the only one. People in the OBE realm, like Bruce Moen and Robert Monroe, have also talked about this, where there are these helper beings who know or see or sense that someone's having the NDE experience and need some kind of basic support or orientation, and they can sense the belief system of the person. So they go, oh, okay, well, this is a fundamentalist Christian. It's probably best if I show up looking like Jesus because that will be really comforting to them so that we can kind of help them, move on into the appropriate kind of place kind of thing. That's literally reported across multiple sources. So we also should factor that in as well, in our interpretations of these types of experiences.
Yeah, and I mean that's the key word, isn't it? Interpretation and how people interpret their experiences, and in many cases they are limiting or restricting the interpretation, as you say, in the literalist way. I mean, you've mentioned Blavatsky and Theosophy, and there are some people who are skeptical about them and say about her who she was and her background and different things that have happened. And you go, well, yes, but that's, what about the message? Forget the messenger. It's kind of focus on the message. So you've looked at, theosophy, theosophy in detail. Sorry, I was like getting my words muddled up. I mean, what is your view on those perspectives, and also Steiner's work? You've looked at that because I know you talk about them and you compare. There are subtle differences.
Yeah, I mean, theosophy is essentially just kind of like um, divine wisdom. That's basically what the term kind of means, wisdom of the gods or that kind of thing.
Mm.
So that's all the tradition was trying to capture, was the wisdom of more ancient traditions, and syncretize and synthesize them, because Blavatsky herself was a master syncretist. She was kind of a neo-Gnostic, but not a classical sort of a Gnostic. But she was. It's interesting. She's one of the most, I think, misunderstood figures in this realm that we will ever hope to come across. There are people who are misunderstood, like Steiner and Carl Jung, and there are others, obviously. I mean, but she, for some reason, seems to have attracted the highest level of confusion and misunderstanding out of anybody who I've seen. So she was actually an intellectual giant. She was a giant among pygmies, and the people who are closest to her, like Judge, who was a co-founding member of the Theosophical Society, he said, literally, this is a verbatim quote, she is not of this earth. Like, she was so overwhelmingly just connected to something that this knowledge and information just poured out of her and poured out of her, and people would just look at her like, where is this even coming from? Like, how are you doing this? It doesn't make sense. So, but she was incredibly well researched as well. I mean, she read. I mean, even now, if she was alive now, she would be misunderstood by most people. They wouldn't know what to do with her, because she was so syncretic, and so she was actually a very advanced kind of consciousness. So what her work was aimed at was basically to try to continue the wisdom traditions and connect those old traditions, including the Eastern ones, into the modern world, and to bring it to the modern world so people could, start waking up. And that was essentially what she was doing. There's a lot of garbage talked about her and as a person, and people have made accusations like she worked for British intelligence, and unfortunately, yet to see any kind of meaningful evidence to support this kind of thing. It's like, instead of getting distracted by that sort of thing, like you said, let's look at the actual content of the message, because what she put together was very, very powerful, and for the time that she was in, it was extremely advanced. I mean, the people around her could barely comprehend her. The enthusiastic ones and the intelligent ones around her, and Theosophy attracted the kind of like the European intelligentsia, like the more educated people. But they stood in awe of her because of who she was and what she was able to do. And one of the other things that people miss, and particularly the born again Christians who are just so tedious, they say things like, "Oh, it's New Age and she's a Satanist and all this sort of stuff," and
Oh yeah.
it's just the most just garbage stuff. First of all, the New Age came after Blavatsky, so they're getting the chronology completely muddled. Um, and if you bother to look at the work, she stresses across her works multiple times the absolute critical importance of someone's moral development and becoming a better person. And that was absolutely central to her message. Like it wasn't about developing occult powers. She wasn't an advocate of black magic at all. She was opposed to it. And she didn't even want people to be distracted by developing occult abilities and stuff. Her message was to become a better human being, which is kind of like the through line of the ancient traditions that she was trying to bring to people's awareness, these older theosophical traditions, which she, put under the banner of Theosophy, like the teachings of Ammonius Saccas, whose students were Origen and Plotinus. And so we have Plotinus's works to this is all theosophy for her. Like all of these things, these wisdom traditions from the mystics of the ages, and esotericists, metaphysicians from the ages gone by. That's what she was trying to bring to us. And it was so important to her that people developed themselves morally and became better people. And that just somehow conveniently gets left out of the discussion.
Yeah, amazing. Um, I mean, as well as the books that you write, you write quite extensively on Substack, and obviously there'll be links to all your work and below. And because there was a post, it was a while ago. I was that linked to a Substack article where you were talking about Blavatsky and how she's misunderstood. And I mean, so many of these things are misunderstood and misinterpreted, and possibly for a reason, whether or I don't know why, because as you say, it's looking at the message, and I mean, what better message? Well, I say better. I mean, that sounds. I mean, it's not judgmental, but I mean, if you're going to have a good message for humanity, it's like, well, let's do what we can to make ourselves the best that we can make ourselves. To be better people, and I mean,
The,
what's wrong with that? So yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the heart of any esoteric or occult teaching that's not like left hand path or black magic is moral development. You see the same thing in Steiner as well. He was absolutely, and he was a Rosicrucian initiate as well. And he was also involved in Theosophy in the very early days until he kind of went
yes,
his
yeah.
own way. But yeah, Blavatsky was adamant about that. She was so, I mean, she'd be rolling in her grave at the way that people have misrepresented her teachings and I mean, her personality is not really relevant, but actually she was embodying what she was teaching and the whole moral development thing was central to that. And it gets left completely out of the discussion. Like you can't, if you look at the detail of what she's saying, your occult spiritual development was actually hinged on the moral development, and that's what nobody who criticizes her has a clue. They have no clue.
Interesting. I mean, that kind of almost takes us into reincarnation because is there a purpose to it? Is that to make us better I mean, or, because there's so many people talk about karma, well, if you've had whatever it is in a previous life, you've got to, air quotes, make up for it in this one, or, and again, that's linear. But I must admit, I don't know anything about Helena Blavatsky's idea on reincarnation. I mean, I don't know what her views are, or whether that's relevant to this. I mean, do they tie in?
Relevant. I'm just curious. When you say relevant, in what are you
To,
connecting it to?
in reincarnation, did where was she? What was her stand
Uh,
on reincarnation? Because I don't know that.
yeah, I mean, it was part of. I think she basically accepted um, that it happened. I think she had a. I'm trying to remember the details of her attitude towards reincarnation.
Oh, okay.
Um, it wasn't something that necessarily she emphasized. I don't recall her being like an advocate as such in terms of like, oh well,
Okay.
if you're naughty in this life, then you'll have to come back. But I think a lot of the people of that age had a similar kind of a they had a slightly linear view of things in some respects where it was like, okay, so there is a karma for them is cause and effect. And so, it's important, excuse me, it's important what you do and who you are now for the future version of you that will, essentially have to reap the consequences of that. But it's not a punishment reward system. It's simply the system dynamics. The rules of the system are you kind of become what you harvest what you sow, and that was the mentality of a lot of those types of teachers, particularly at that time. But in my model,
Hmm.
I emphasize more. I look at reincarnation from multiple different levels, and so from where we stand, it looks very linear, obviously because of the nature of the game that we're participating in. And then you have like kind of like the astral mental levels, which are still very much kind of extensions, if you like, excuse me, of the Earth life system. And so you have a level of continuity there in terms of like temporal continuity, and the personality leaves the physical realm, they go into the astral kind of orientation area, they go through the healing processes, and they maybe figure out what to do with the maybe plan the next life kind of thing. That's at least what the regression, the Newton school sort of shows. Um, but I was quite interested in the causal level of it because that's where things get much less linear. And if you get to the level of the causal entity, the oversoul entity, that's where you have basically the absence of any kind of sense of linear time. So from that level, it's all just you can just kind of pick and choose. Like, "Oh, I'll have a lifetime in 2000 BC. I'll have a lifetime here in 1968." And just like whatever, it's all the same from that level. Like you're kind of just planning out, okay, which kind of version of the game do I feel like having a go at here? Do I want this version or somewhere in between? Like the timeline is just kind of open to you. And so that's kind of like the architect level in my model where the planning happens and the creation of the next personality structure by the bundling together of different traits or like programs or subroutines to be bundled together into a new personality. That's sort of where that happens, if you like.
So there can't be any cause and effect karma, because they aren't linear. It's not that, because of this, you've got to do that in somewhere else. So there's, um, and and yet, because of the acts that we're hearing about certain people, air quotes, actually doing, evil people doing evil things or something. A lot of people want a sort of justice. They want them to have some kind of, that there should be justice, and the idea that they go into the same kind of consciousness, if not they go into consciousness, but their experience beyond this life, if you like, is the same as everybody else's. Or is it, are there, because again, sorry, I'm diving into different things, but like the life review, I think that's really where I'm going with that. There's a life review, and that's reflected back about what happens in this life, if you like, and then choices are made, but it's not judgmental. And some people are kind of like, no, they should be judged because of what they're doing. And so I'm just curious what your view is on all of that, and in terms of the reincarnation and how that's connected in other lives and karma.
Yeah, I mean, from that level we were talking about, the causal oversoul level, that kind of linearity and cause and effect thing kind of goes out the window. Um, but then, we have multiple traditions and people telling us something quite different from a different reference point within a different context. But yeah, the life review stuff shows that. I mean, it's quite clear to me that if you look at the life review in detail, it's not, there's never imposed judgment, there's never condemnation. And again, going back to like the system rules or the algorithms that determine the experience, it's basically impersonal. But what people experience is essentially in that stage, in the early stages, like largely their externalized mind. And so the life review shows them, hey, here's what this person experienced when you did that to them. And for a lot of people, that's very painful because they literally experience the pain that they caused somebody else. But that's not inflicted by any kind of external authority or whatever. It's just part of the system where their awareness field or their informational bandwidth has expanded, their personality has expanded its boundaries to be able to take in the other personality as well. And so now they have their experience, but they also have the other person's experience of how it impacted them. And in some cases, you get reports like from Danny and Brinkley, where not only the other person's experience, like he was an assassin, he was a professional assassin, and he would kill people for a living. In his first NDE life review, he experienced not only the death of that person or whatever suffering he caused them, but the flow-on effects of the way that their family was affected, the way the family suffered, the way the next, like the friends of the family were impacted. Like he got these ripple effects on multiple layers. So, and it's just an expansion of perceptual awareness, the perceptual field expanding to take in much more than it usually can. So we can see, like the cause and effect thing becomes very, very personal and intimate and visceral. Like people, it changes people because they go, oh, wow, look at the effect I had when I did that thing. When I smiled at that random store clerk as I was leaving, I didn't think anything of it, but it actually made their day, or it stopped them from committing suicide later on, or something like that. Like they get the full, all of it, not just the bad stuff, but they get the good stuff too. So it's not a punishment thing. It's a full life. It is what it says. It's a life review. Here's what happened and on an effective level for you and for the other person, and the cause and effect ripple effect of that. And so there's no punishment. There's never an imposed punishment by another being. The system itself is kind of impersonal like that. And it's not, this is a very long-winded way of getting to the point of saying
Nice. No, go. Yeah, because that's important. The Daniel Buckley, yeah, that's just amazing. What happened, as you say, the
yeah.
ripple out into, the effect on the families of the people, or the people who would have been born had those people lived. It's just phenomenal. But yes, sorry, carry on. So the point you were going to.
So yeah, a long-winded way of saying that the system we're operating in, that we're playing this game in, is actually, it's not a moralistic system. Excuse me. It's not a moralistic system in the way that, a religious mind would think that it is. Like, well, you've committed X number of sins and you've done some good deeds, and here's the accounting of it all. It doesn't work like that. What people get back to them, fed back to them in the life review is just the fruits of what they've done. Like this is the impact that you had. This is, and the point of it really is to it's feedback for living, like doing better. When you come back to the body to continue on your way, that you do better, that you're not the same. That's all it is. It's supposed to be, it's a transformative event. And there's like this need-serving aspect that a number of researchers have noted about, NDEs. People get what they need from it. But yeah, ultimately, the moral aspect of the system that we're in is not what a lot of people would assume. It's not this was good, this was bad, this was a sin, this was. It's actually just ultimately about the evolution of the individual. So there is a thrust, like there is a kind of like a cosmic, impersonal developmental thrust in a certain evolutionary direction to be a better soul, and to, harvest as much knowledge and experience as we can, but in the process, becoming better versions of ourselves. That's kind of the way that the system operates. It's designed to nudge us in that direction. And obviously, you can fight against that. You can go and become a Satanist, or, a paid assassin or whatever. You can be a diabolical POS if you want, because there's still the free will aspect of it. But at the same time, eventually you will have to harvest what you've sown, and that might not be such a fun experience if you, go down a more dark path, as some people are about to find out over the next few decades.
Yeah, and again, you touched on something else, free will. There were two parts because I mean, the part of me was like, well, um, people who, if you like, believe in the, God, and I'm not denying the sort of like a divine creator, as it were, and yet not the God in the way that we're kind of made to believe in the biblical sense of, judgmental God. And as you say, there's no judgment, but there's no judgment from, it's not an external judgment. It's more an understanding, and then, okay, well, this is it, and what are you going to do about it, if you like? What are you going to do
Exactly.
with this understanding? Okay. So in terms of free will, because some is again, if we choose, apparently, if we're saying that say apparently, I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. I mean, it seems that we choose to have this experience and have certain experiences within this physical realm. So where's the free will in terms of what we do here if we've made choices? And I know, this is a discussion I have with different people, and it's interesting. So I'd like to hear
Mm.
your view on that, please.
What is the nature of free will?
Well, is there free will? Yeah, what is it? Yeah, what are your views on it? Because I feel there is something. It might not be quite what we think, but yeah,
Mm.
it's not about me. It's like, what are your views, please?
Well, I'd be interested to hear yours as well. I, the I think essentially what we have is we are, this version of it, like if you like, this version of our personality is not the part of us that initiates incarnation into the game, or at least we have that memory essentially suppressed because we have to undergo this kind of like contraction process to even participate in this realm, and I detail that in the book as well. Because a lot of people think that we have this maliciously imposed amnesia by these archons or whatever it might be, and it's wrong. There's actually, again, it's just part of the nature of the system that as you descend into certain operational contexts, certain information becomes part of your subconscious. It's not lost, it's not erased. It's just you just can't access it as well because we have this compressed kind of state. So we come into this physical Earth life under enormous restrictions and constraints like that we don't have under virtually any other kind of operational context. Like as soon as you drop the body, you have a huge like capacity for freedom and choice and do whatever you want. You can fly. You can go and visit your ancestors. I mean, like the possibilities become endless. But while you're in the body in the physical game, it's you have massive constraints placed on you. So free will is there, but it's not as free as we might be accustomed to. Like it's limited, so it's free will within certain limits, and that's just kind of what it is. And I think also if we accept that, and I've got so much information about this in the book, and this is part of the framework, but if we accept that there is, if you like, the higher being, the oversoul that kind of actually architects the life experience and is the kind of art, the theme body or the part of us that dictates like the evolutionary arc that it's going to experience and explore, then an individual human personality like Dawn is just one little aspect of the exploration of that larger developmental or explorational arc. And so Dawn, I mean, Dawn can write a book about, health and illness and what really makes us ill, or she could go and write a book about, rabbit breeding practices or something. Like you could, but your personality has been structured in such a way in advance, designed in such a way that you are not likely to go and write a book about rabbit breeding practices. You're going to probably do exactly what you've been doing. Like I'm not going to go and join the corporate world. I've because that's just not what I'm here for. I'm not designed for that. So,
No, no, I
like I
can't see you doing
could.
that at all.
No,
Mm.
that's good. I'm glad. So it's like I could do a lot of different things, but my personality is built in such a way that it narrows the scope a lot. Like I've got, I'm going to go do this thing or this thing. I'm not going to do all these other things. And that's not because some diabolical force is taking my, freedom or my options away. It's just I'm not interested in doing those other things because of the way that I'm built. So we have constraints, and astrologically, when you're born, that is another layer of like constraints, and it's. I'm not saying it's a cause and effect thing, but it is a map. Like you can map somebody's kind of general life arc numerologically or astrologically. And those are the constraints, if you like, the energetic constraints that exist at the moment that you come into the game to play the game. So, we have multiple levels and layers of these constraints that we are essentially volunteering to operate under while we're here.
It's interesting you say about astrology. I mean, do you think we choose the moment because of the astrology? Or, no, I don't mean because, but words, language. The moment is chosen because that astrology then um, guides us to be what we are choosing to be. Like you're not going to go into the corporate world. So whatever your astrology is fits that um, model of your experience in this 3D, the physical world.
Yeah, yeah, it might be something like that. And it's funny because I haven't seen a lot of references to the astrological aspect in any sources, really. Bruce Moen mentions it in one of his books. He has 5 books, and he does talk about it in a certain context. He did a lot of out-of-body exploration, and the astrological configuration. He had some interactions with other beings around the Earth life system who are kind of like administrative type figures. And he got a lot of information from them. I think one of them had to do with astrology and the configuration being intentionally selected for the purposes of that lifetime. It's so, but it's funny because for such an important sort of field of human endeavor and research, astrology doesn't feature a lot in the material that I've gone. I mean, I've gone through thousands of different sources and what have you, and it doesn't show up that much. You would think that it gets a mention in terms of like the planning of the human life ahead, and like let's go for this astrological configuration because that'll support the personality type that we want to be, and all that it doesn't really show up. But Bruce Moen does mention it in one of his books, and I hope I left that quote in my manuscript.
Okay, I don't remember in seeing it. However, that's just like, yeah. Well, that's a new aspect for you. Sorry, I don't mean, but no, I'm not giving you more to look at. I was just curious. But see, it sounds like I'm just saying it because you said it. But I mean, we have free will within the context of what we have chosen. So if you're like, I was having a conversation with somebody and we're talking about like if you like guardrails, but not really guardrails, but within the context of what we choose, there's free will within that.
Mm.
And yet, I'm not going to go off and go into politics or something like that. It's like no way. That's just so that's I've got free will, but I'm not choosing that. That's not it. That's not within the context of anything I'm likely to choose to do.
Hmm.
That. So
Yeah.
pretty much along the lines of what you were saying. So we do, um, and
It's interesting because you have. Sorry, well, maybe I
yeah,
should let
yeah,
you
go
finish
on.
that thought.
No, 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 no.
Um,
That's yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. That we have traditions like Buddhism, and Vedanta where it's not so much about the like an oversoul entity that consciously architects or designs the new personality, but like the Buddhist traditions have like the skandhas concept with like these heaps or aggregates of kind of like traits and tendencies that are kind of like guiding like almost like subroutines in the personality in a non-deterministic way. So it's like you might end up with as a result, let's say, as a result of other lifetimes or what have you, that accumulated so-called karma, you have certain personality attributes that have built up over time, and are stored in the field in the non-physical realm. and then become embodied in the next, personality instance that's activated in the human life experiment. And those might not be consciously chosen or designed, but they are internal, like intrinsic biases or attractors that draw us in certain directions. Like I've been drawn into writing and music. And so because of those internal like algorithms, if you like, we are inevitably going to go in certain directions and avoid certain other types of experiences, regardless of whether it was intentionally architected or not, if it's more of the Buddhist kind of situation. So yeah, so again, the free will thing, but under the constraints that we have, wound up with, inherited or what have you.
or chosen, yes.
Yeah.
Um, where I've got a few more. I mean, I'm aware of your time, but have you got a little bit longer, or are you okay for
Yeah,
a bit
yeah, I'm
longer?
good. I haven't passed out yet either, which is good.
No, no. Yeah, I just, I don't want to, push you too far because before we close, I, want you to talk more about your book and what's going on and, what is important to share with people at this point. Um, so, so many things. Oh, one of the interesting things I've come across is the what's called terminal lucidity, which people who have quite, I mean, they're close to death, and quite often in health or lack of health situations where they're really out of it. So it could be either dementia or whatever, and there's not, there's very little communication, and yet there's this time just before they die where something just shifts. I mean, I find that fascinating. So I'd like to hear, your explanation and also what you think is going on, or I say think, I mean, from what you've researched, how what that kind of means or what that could mean.
Yeah, I actually, I guess I didn't send it to you. I have a section on this in the book, and I have a little bit of a theory or a hypothesis about what might be happening with that, and I probably can't, put it together quite as well here. But I think basically it's interesting because what you're saying happens is exactly what's happening, and um, it doesn't make any sense from a normal physiological medical perspective. It can't be explained, so we need a different explanation. And I think it's something along the lines of the what's happening is the person is dying and there's a separation process that's taking place. Like we have when you're born, you have the integration of the mind with the body, and then as you're dying, you have the opposite, the disintegration and the separation. And so I think the center of consciousness that we mentioned at the start, the ego, is starting to separate from the physical and operate rather than operating through like the neurological context. It's shifting its locus into more of an astral, non-physical kind of a locus. And so, but it hasn't completely separated. So you get this like expansion of perception and expansion of ability, cognitive ability and physical ability, which is all documented, and baffles everybody, baffles all the physicians. But if you have that expanded awareness where the body and the brain are no longer the central anchorage point of the mind, and the mind is starting to operate in the non-physical context, you might have the recovery of cognitive ability. You might have the recovery of physical abilities that have been never existed for this person or maybe been dormant for decades or something. And you get this mysterious sudden resurgence and like vitality in their talking and their singing and people just scratch their heads because it doesn't make sense from a dying brain point of view. That framework just doesn't work. So yeah, I've got those sorts of ideas around that.
Yes, I mean it was in the sections that you sent me. That's why I wanted to raise it because I just find it fascinating, and I think it's interesting for people to hear some of the ideas that are fleshed out in a, a great detail in the book. I mean, we're only touching, well, we're touching on a number of them, and some of the main ones, but still touching on them, um, because that it's, as you say, because my focus is on the medical system and what they get wrong. And that's just another example of they don't understand, and until they look at the mind, and that's really one leading to the next question, because as you say, the mind isn't in the brain, and so it's like it's not located there, and you say, well, where is it? And but it's yeah, I mean, it's a big topic, but it's certainly not in the brain, and yet they say that death is, with the sort of brain death, and that's a whole other story, because it's the person isn't necessarily dead when the brain's dead, so that's separate issue, but it's still that idea that there's something functioning that isn't the brain, isn't physical. So I don't know. I mean, I get for me, that sounds comforting, that there's something else is definitely going on. So, for people who are sitting around somebody who's dying and see that moment, it can be a little bit disconcerting, I would have thought, because I think, oh, they're okay, and yet that's the moment before they leave. Um, um, I mean, I don't know if you want to go into shared death experiences as well, because then that's a within that similar.
Did you have anything specific that you wanted to touch on that one?
Well, just really to share what that is, for people who know nothing about this topic or know very little about it, and what that means. Because again, there's a fear of death within our culture, and I think really to have these conversations is to help people um, recognize that it's the I was going to say, it's not to be fearful, but to understand that there's something else going on, and it's not to fear, because it's not like we think it's the end of us. That's the problem with the materialistic view of science, medical science, and everything. So it's to help people understand there's more to us than this.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, I guess that's the whole point of why I do what I do, really, is
Well,
that
well,
that idea.
precisely. Well,
Yeah.
precisely. So, it's just picking up on the different points to help people start to maybe even to hear it, to understand it, and to be able to intuitively connect with that, get that sense of, I always wondered about that kind of thing. And so
Mm,
to get that comfort, so they stop living in fear, because that's what the system is trying to get us to live in fear, so
mm,
that we
yeah.
just defer to them. So
Hmm.
I know that's a long-winded way but
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
my idea, really, to share information so people can make informed decisions, so people can, live, get a better understanding, and to know what this life is about and what they can do with it. So
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
I'll shut
exactly.
up now and leave you to it.
Okay, well, I mean, you mentioned like the shared death experience thing, which is interesting. I mean, I think Raymond Moody put that on the map as well. I did talk about it a little bit. People at somebody's deathbed, and suddenly I mean, the experiences differ. Sometimes people experience the room becoming filled with light, and multiple people having this same experience, or multiple people experience this amazing ethereal music suddenly filling the house, and just at the moment that this person's transitioning. People are. I've got a couple of spectacular clairvoyant reports from a lady who watched people's, souls, if we can use that word, separate from the body and leave, and be escorted away by deceased family members who, like their deceased child who had died earlier, for example. And you read those descriptions, and they're quite stunning, and taken in terms of the larger tapestry and the larger framework, they're actually very convincing and very compelling. So, I mean, there are just so many angles that you can look at this from, and the key with all of it is, I mean, the key word there is shared. And whether it's an NDE or someone at the deathbed of somebody dying, or shared out of body experiences, dreams. I mean, that's really the kind of that's the crux of it. That's actually the most important thing to me is the shared aspect of any of the experiences. Because as soon as you have shared experiences in consciousness, the materialist physicalist paradigm fails. As soon as you have shared experiences in the mind, separate from the body, like Michael Talbot shared a classic in the holographic universe, which I still remember. Somebody had been dead in, I think, in a hospital. They'd temporarily died, had an NDE, gone into the light, had an experience on the other side, and then as they were coming back through the sort of tunnel type experience towards the body, someone they knew was going the opposite direction and having their own NDE. And they so they get back to their body and they recover. This other person is actually turns out to be somewhere else in the same hospital, if memory serves me correctly. They're in the same hospital, also having a simultaneous NDE, but neither of the people are aware of each other being in the building. They don't know that they're, needing medical attention and they've gone to the same hospital or any of that stuff. But they get back to their bodies and they recover and they have a conversation and realize that they've actually had a literal shared NDE. And unless consciousness is non-local, how do you explain that? Like, it doesn't make sense unless consciousness is non-local.
Totally. I mean, people who have the NDEs and they talk about what was going on in different rooms somewhere else, and and the doctors, that can be verified. That has been verified. That those sorts of experiences, as you say, it can't possibly be the way we're told. So the materialistic, deterministic, reductionist view has to just go out the window. It just is not supported at all.
No.
I In terms of channeling, I mean, we have kind of talked about channeling, and obviously you said material and various materials are channeled. I mean, what are your views? I mean, a lot of people are doing kind of channeling. Where are you on that? And yeah, well, what are your views?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, that one. Um,
Mm,
I don't think it's necessarily just one thing happening.
okay.
Um, I know that the Theosophists, Blavatsky was particularly she viewed that whole concept with disdain, because to them the idea was that the if you like the ego or the soul had of the deceased had moved on into the post-mortem realm, the Devacanic realm, and from there, their view was that we would have to separate our consciousness and to go into the spirit world to have contact with them. They were not coming back to the physical realm to do channeling. So their view was what was being channeled was maybe a discarded astral body, like a discarded astral shell, becoming animated by the energy of the medium and the people attending, or potentially an elemental. Which is kind of an interesting concept in itself. So these sort of like we exist in this elemental essence, sort of this field that can be animated or animated or controlled to some extent by human thought and takes the form of human thoughts and is influenced by what we think. And so you get these sort of like elemental type creatures becoming the thing that's being channeled and posing. So it could be the discarded astral shell, or it could be the elemental entity thing posing as the living conscious soul of the person. But they thought that was all it was, and that they'd moved on. The deceased person's moved on. They're not coming back. So that was their kind of perspective. I don't know that that's necessarily a open shut case like that. I think there are times where it certainly seems like there's some compelling evidence that some of these types of channeling events might be legitimate contacts. And if you look at general contact experiences with people coming back from the other side, then that kind of lends it a certain amount of credibility. But one of the things with Blavatsky was she would constantly warn about the problem with most psychics and clairvoyants was they didn't have the capacity to distinguish or discern what the being was that they were actually letting speak through them, allowing to speak. So That's an interesting question in itself. So, is it possible to make the distinction? I mean, how many people have that ability? I don't know. That's an open question to me. I mean, I used to sit in mediumship circles. I spent 2 years sitting in a mediumship development circle in my from the age of 20 to 22. And so I got to see a lot of really weird and interesting stuff. And some of it, I'm like, well, on the face of it, some of it might be legit. But I think a lot of when you're talking about channeling, it's different. It's like, okay, if you're talking about connecting with someone who's supposedly deceased and on the other side, that's a different thing to someone who's thinking that they're channeling, like Saint Germain or whatever. Like that realm, I don't hold that in particularly high regard at all because a lot of what comes out of channelers in that space is just patent fluff and nonsense, and there's no discernment on the part of the channeler or the audience for that matter. So you have to kind of like distinguish, okay, what kind of channeling are we talking about here? Are we in a mediumship group to communicate with the dead? Are we channeling ascended masters or aliens? Like, because it's not the same, it's not necessarily the same thing. And a lot of channel material is just BS. I mean, a lot of it just doesn't make sense and is wrong.
Well, again, because as I started it, right at the beginning, the material I came across, the Seth material. I mean, um, looking at it, critically, there you can see that a lot of the information was filtered through Jane Roberts' own belief systems, and that doesn't discredit everything that came through. So, it is that discernment piece, which of course, that's the name of the podcast. So, um, it is really, as you say, discerning and not just saying it's all nonsense or it's all right. It's being able to recognize, to see the message. And it's not cherry picking. It is actually to recognize where there's something that's useful in the information. I mean, with the body of the work, the set, I was like loads of it, and most of it was extra, unnecessary. The gems within it were, um, yeah, I mean, again, useful and but
Mm.
intuitive. But it's it's not. So, I mean, some people like really study it, and it seems to have come back. I've seen stuff on Facebook where they're really kind of getting back into the Seth material, and
Uh,
I think being stuck on something like that. So okay, that's useful, but use it as a stepping stone and keep going and keep opening and keep exploring. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but
and I
it's,
think we should be able to sit in the question. Like I'm happy to sit in the question and say, I don't have all the answers, but there's some compelling material,
mm,
and a lot of the Seth material is quite high quality.
mm,
It's very coherent.
mm,
It's definitely superior to most of the channeled stuff I've seen. And it's not all the same. So like, and it annoys me that some people ha hold channeling or channeled material in such high regard as well, as if that's got to be just automatically the best mat information that we can come up with, which I don't agree with at all. Um, and which is why I don't have any desire to channel my books. I actually write, write and research and, operate very critically. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to sit in the question and look at what stands up to scrutiny, what makes sense, what can't we do anything with, what's clearly nonsense. I mean, yeah, it's that's going to be an ongoing process. I don't think we're going to have a clean answer to like the channeling because there's multiple different types and styles and whatever. So yeah, that's also one of the reasons I don't focus on it in my book. I had in chapter one, I actually had a chapter one that was like 40,000 words, and I got rid of it, the whole thing, because it was largely like one foot in this realm, and it was like, okay, communication from the other side, all the different types and modes of that. What does it look like? EVP, all that sort of stuff. And I realized in the end, like what I'm building is kind of like it doesn't really matter. That stuff doesn't matter that much, and so I got rid of it to clear some space and make the book a little smaller. And yeah, so it's not my focus, but it is interesting. I've seen a lot of interesting material in that space.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So has, I don't know if you start to bring this to a close, and let's talk about the book, where you are, where you are with it, and again, where when we're recording this is a little bit ahead of what you're launching. So if you want to talk about where you are, what you're planning, and by the time this comes out, it will all be up and running. So do tell us more, and then, well, as I say, all the links will be in the show notes. But yeah, do share
Yeah,
where you are with
thanks for
it.
mentioning that. Yeah, by
No,
the time
no.
people, I think we have a little bit of a lag, but it's okay. By the time people see our episode, the crowdfunding campaign to bring the book into print and bring it to the world is going to be active and live. So yeah, thanks for mentioning the show notes because we'll put the link in there. So if people want to get their hands on it, the best way to do that at this point in time is via the crowdfunder because we've got not just the book, but other rewards if you like, different tiers, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that'll be live. I encourage anyone who wants to get their hands on it to head over there. And I thank you in advance for helping me to bring it into the world. The book is written. It's not something. It's not a concept. It's not an idea. Like I want to write a book one day. It's written. We're doing a crowdfund to bring it into the world properly and make it execute the way that it should be rather than doing it kind of half-assed and you're not doing it justice because it is something that's unique in the field and it does move the field ahead. When you see the whole package, it moves it ahead a good step. So yeah, I appreciate anyone who wants to get on board and get access to it early and support the creation of it as a physical print item and get it around the world. So that's the main thing I just wanted to kind of mention at the moment. That's my focus for now is get that in people's hands.
That's wonderful. So the crowdfunder is for people to order it early so that you're building up funds. So that's the purpose. So people will actually get a copy of the book through the
Yep.
crowdfunder. So it's not a in advance and sometime later on they'll get it. So it is something.
Well, it's essentially putting an order in for the book and getting, depending on what level of contribution, there's a basic kind of like ebook level, then there's other, physical level, hardcover, and extra offerings and rewards on the different tier levels of contribution. So, yeah, it's essentially putting an order in for the book and yeah, helping to bring it into the world.
Excellent. So there'll be a hard copy as well as paperback, as well as an ebook.
Yes, for the campaign, for people who contribute to the campaign, we're going to do all of those. I don't know about after the campaign if we'll still have a hardback version of it, but we'll definitely have a paperback and ebook for sure.
All right, okay. Any plans for an audio book?
Yeah, we're doing that too. So
Oh,
if you're a
excellent.
listener, if you like to listen, get over there to the page.
Oh, excellent. Is there an audio book for book one as well?
No, no.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Okay.
It's because I actually had a friend who really liked the book a lot who sent me like a sample audio chapter of it because they wanted to volunteer their time to do it. Um, But it would actually have to be kind of rewritten. The style of prose doesn't lend itself to an audio book for book one. So maybe in the future I'll do that. But book two absolutely will be an audio book because it will work.
Oh, excellent. Okay, that's wonderful. Um, so I was going to say, is there like anything else going on? But of course, you're focused on getting the book out and getting that published. So, uh, or is there anything else going on? Because, again, like you said at the beginning, the Evolve Yourself, are you still running those programs?
Yeah, I am. So if people
Oh,
want to check out
wow.
what, yeah, still going. Yeah, if people want to check it out, the free masterclass, the web class is at evolveyourself.live.
Right. No, I mean, the wow, it's not because you're still doing it. It's just that you've got time to still do that when you're writing
Well,
because,
yeah. It's not an everyday thing. It's just a kind of like a, once every sort of 5, 6 weeks kind of thing.
right. Oh, okay.
Mm.
So, as I say, I've got all your links. Is there yeah, so people can also get a copy of The Grand Illusion, the book one. Um,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that's all. So my website, just in case people want to go book one, that's brendandmurphy.com. And if you add slash TGI, that'll take you straight to that book page.
I've got that
But
link. Yes, that'll be there.
thank you for that. I appreciate that. And yeah, book two is going to be the crowdfunding campaign link. That's the only way it's available right now is through that.
Right. So for book one, people can only get that through your website, or can they get that elsewhere? Or
The website's generally the best place to go because if you go elsewhere, it might be more expensive, and if it's Amazon, you'll have fees taken out of it. It's better to just get it through direct from the author in this case because it's on my website.
right. Okay. No, I was just clarifying that point because, not sometimes, people have their, like, what really makes you is on Amazon, because we just did it a different way. So
Mm.
book one is on your website. The link will be there. Book two will be on the crowdfunder. The link will be in the show notes. Evolve Yourself is also um, evolveyourself.live and on Substack, where you are pretty prolific as well. You write quite a bit there.
Yeah, I don't know if you do you, oh, well, I guess we can include the link in the show notes.
Yes, I've got, oh yes, yes, definitely got the
It's
link in
that
the show notes.
my Substack is called Awakening Minds.
Oh, right. Okay. So, but the link is the substack.com at official Brendan Murphy. Yes.
Oh yeah, you've got it. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Now now I get that. And your main website, brendandmurphy.com, or is that changing? So it's still,
That's the same.
that's the same. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Well, I think that's got everything covered. Unless there was anything you wanted to add to the conversation, any other thoughts, any other parting ideas, or
Uh,
what you'd like to share if we haven't
you know,
covered.
there's I've always got this little voice going in the back of my mind where when we're talking, as I'm talking about one thing or highlighting one thing. Um, in an interview format, we can't cover every angle of the topic under discussion. It's just not possible. But in my book, I'm like, because I can hear people's objections as I'm saying something like, oh, but what about this? And I'm like, yeah, I've covered that too. Like it's a very multi-leveled, iterative kind of a read. So I mean, people are actually kind of going through my chronology and timeline journey. That's like the structure of the book in a way, because it's been developed over such a long period of time, and my awareness and my ideas and insights have progressed as I'm making the thing. So it's sort of very iterative and layered. And so if you start at the start and get to the end, by that point you are a quantum leap ahead of where the discussion is at, and your friends will be eating your dust.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, that's the other thing is as we keep developing and exploring our what we think changes. So it's, as you say, it maps your journey, and we get to see your thinking and how that it expands. And I like to write that way as well. So there's a flow, there's a journey that you're taking people on. Because as you say, a lot of the information was from book one, which was 2012. Book one was
Hmm.
published, yes. So the ideas are the same, and you've added to them and expanded on them.
Well, yeah, I mean, my best insights and the things that I've, realized have really been happening in the last, six six months, I would say, because of the distillation and the crystallization happening, as you when you I mean you would know like when you work on something for so long and that's where your focus is for so long, you start to have ideas that people haven't had. You start to connect things in ways that people haven't done it before. And so that process is like the back end of the book actually concentrates a lot of that, like the distillation and the new framework and the insights that actually people could look at and then go, oh, well, I'll take that idea in chapter 9 and go back to chapter 3 and apply that and see how things look if I use that lens. That like that could be done because of the way that it's been put together. But yeah, I've just the more I sit with it, the more things crystallize, and I'm pretty pumped about the result of what's in there now. Yeah.
Very exciting. Can't wait to get my own copy. So looking forward to that. And so yeah, so thank you so much, Brendan, and I'm not going to wish you luck. I wish you every success with the book, because it is truly amazing, and with the excerpts that I've read are, just show the depth of and breadth of your contemplation and your exploration, and how you put all these pieces together. You synthesize all these pieces, and don't stick with that's what it is. As you say, you're still there. Well, we're still exploring, we're still looking, and this is where we are. So it's wonderful. So
No,
thank you
thanks
very
for that.
much for your time, Brendan. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks,
Um,
Dawn.
you're welcome. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.